It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. A mother and her 3 children die in a house fire in northwest London. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. 9 children from the same family are killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Their parents are doctors at one of the territory's main hospitals. Strikes in Kyiv injure at least 15 people as Russia and Ukraine exchange more prisoners of war. Civil rights leader Al Sharpton accuses Donald Trump of trying to reverse progress in American policing as the U.S. marks the anniversary of George Floyd's death. Also ahead, the government reveals its plans to modernize British zoos with a series of welfare reforms. And Sunderland end their 8-year wait to return to the Premier League with a dramatic championship playoff win over Sheffield United. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. A 41-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a mother and her 3 children were killed in a house fire in northwest London. The Metropolitan Police are investigating after being called to help firefighters in the early hours of this morning. A 43-year-old woman, her 15-year-old daughter and her 2 sons, aged 8 and 4, died at the scene. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury reports.
A fire described by neighbours as non-stop, tearing through 2 adjoining homes, enough to completely gut them. It took 70 firefighters to put it out. By daylight, the extent of the damage visible, the true impact unspeakable.
Crews wearing breathing apparatus were able to rescue the woman and one of the children from the 2nd floor, but they were later declared deceased at the scene. A further 2 children were discovered to have died in the fire as crews carried out search of the properties involved.
Detectives for the Metropolitan Police are leading the investigation to determine the cause of the fire. A 41-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder.
We remain in the early stages of our investigation. However, 1 man was arrested outside the house. He remains in custody and is being questioned by officers.
The fire has devastated this tight-knit community. Some locals say the fire service took too long to respond.
A neighbour here told us that a family at the adjoining property managed to escape. A mother and her 7 children. Their home and its belongings now completely destroyed. And somehow they are the lucky ones.
To be honest, I don't want to look around and look at the house because it's really shocking, to be honest, really shocking.
2 other people, a woman in her 70s and a teenage girl, were taken to hospital. Their condition is unknown. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in Brent.
9 children from the same family have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on their home in Gaza. Doctors at the Nasser hospital in Khan Younis in the south of the Strip say the children's father and another sibling were injured in the strike. The children's mother, who's also a doctor at Nasser hospital, was on duty at the time of the attack. The Israeli military says it's reviewing claims of harm to civilians and a warning that there is distressing content in this report from our international correspondent, Alex Rossi.
In Gaza, emergency workers rushing to the site of another airstrike. Israeli bombs do not discriminate between young and old. When they get there, they start recovering the badly burned remains of children. Is there anybody alive? They shout into the dark. It is a horrific scene. One body after another emerges from the rubble. In all, there are 9 brothers and sisters from the same family. The eldest child was just 12. The images have been blurred because they are too graphic to show.
We started to get them out, one by one. We got out the 3rd child. Of course, we couldn't identify the children. They were charred. They had no clothes, no face. They were remains.
Nearby, their father, Dr. Hamdi Al-Najjar, is found alive but gravely wounded. He doesn't know yet that most of his family is gone. 9 of his 10 children killed. He'd just returned home after dropping his wife, Dr. Ala Al-Najjar, a paediatrician, at work for her shift. Then the missile struck. Israel's military says it was targeting suspects in Khan Younis and is reviewing the claim of harm to civilians. The paramedics take Dr. Al-Najjar to the Nasser Medical Complex. Where he once saved lives, he returns as a casualty. British doctors working alongside Palestinian medics operated on their only surviving child. He's called Adam.
The last patient on my list today was an 11-year-old boy who seemed much younger, so we lifted him onto the operating table. His injuries were bad enough, but the background, I think, was worse. The father was a physician here at the Nasser hospital. We've asked about him. He had no political and no military connections. He doesn't seem to be prominent on social media. And yet his poor wife is the only uninjured one.
At the hospital, the bodies of the dead children are gently taken from the ambulance, one by one.
كلهم أطفال صغار لا يتجاوز العمر عن 10 سنوات. كلهم أطفال لا يتجاوز العمر عن 10 سنوات من 6 شهور و5 شهور وسنة وسنتين.
They're then laid on the floor of the morgue. This is a place of unimaginable grief. This video shared by the family shows Eve, Ruslan and Jubran playing before the war started. Now, along with their siblings, they are another statistic in a conflict that has claimed the lives of thousands of children. But despite the rising death toll, the Israeli military campaign is intensifying. For those trapped here, the horror of this war is endless. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Let's go to the war in Ukraine now, where 307 prisoners on each side have been exchanged on day 2 of what could ultimately be the biggest prisoner swap of the war so far. It comes after 15 people were injured when the Ukrainian capital came under drone and missile attacks overnight. Here's our defense and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark.
Kyiv came under a sustained drone attack and missile attack last night, lasting 7 hours. Reportedly, 250 drones were used and 14 ballistic missiles. It sent the population again underground into the tube stations to shelter for most of the night. And there are indications that there were other attacks in other parts of Ukraine, in the south and further east, and as far west as Odessa. So that air operation on the Russians' part goes on. But the Ukrainians hit back themselves on Yelets. Last night, they claimed to have hit a battery factory on the Russian side of the border, deep inside Russia, in fact, at Yelets. And the battery factory creates batteries, manufactures batteries for missiles. And so Yelets itself is not a particularly important town, but the battery factory is, because without batteries, Russia's ballistic and cruise missiles can't easily operate. We have no idea how much damage the Ukrainians might have done to Yelets battery factory. They claim that they had a big hit on it, but we'll see. But if they were able to interrupt the supply of batteries to missiles, then arguably they can do something about the number of ballistic and cruise missiles that are being targeted against Ukraine, more or less now on a nightly basis. Meanwhile, the ground war goes on, and attention at the moment is concentrated on Kharkiv and the area in the north of Ukraine. Kharkiv is the second city. It's only less than 20 miles away from the border. And reportedly, the Russians are massing troops on their side of the border. The Ukrainians have been talking about this for several weeks now. And the expectation is that they're going to launch some sort of offensive in the north against the Kharkiv area and further northwest against Sumy, which is another major city in the north of Ukraine. Almost certainly, the Russians won't be able to take Kharkiv. It's the second city. It's a big city. They'd never got really near to taking it in 2022 when they really did try, nor can they probably take Sumy as cities. But what they probably can do is actually get over the border and begin to put pressure all the way along this border. What the Russians say, and they're making this fairly clear in Putin's statements, is that they want a buffer zone all the way along the front to protect them from Ukrainian attacks. From a military point of view, that's neither here nor there. It's not what they want. What they want to do is to create pressure along the border to pin Ukrainian forces in place so that those Ukrainian forces can't go further south, where they're now badly needed for the summer offensives, which the Russians are also pursuing in the south. And the other reason that they might want forces on the Ukrainian side of the border is it gives them a foot in the Kharkiv Oblast, the Kharkiv region and the Sumy region. And if they have a foot in those regions, then in any future negotiations, and we're a long way from them at the moment, but in any future negotiations, they will say, we're already in those regions, we will keep that footprint, and of course we want more, just as we want more in the 4 other oblasts that we have a footprint in, but we haven't fully conquered. So the politics of this overlays all of the military activity, and not least, the politics of this comes into the prisoner exchange, which is ongoing at the moment. Yesterday, about 500 prisoners were exchanged on each side, 500 each, and today, another 350-odd on each side. We expect these prisoner exchanges to go on again tomorrow until both sides have exchanged 1,000 prisoners, as they agreed to do last weekend at the Istanbul summit. This is all good in itself. It's a humanitarian gesture. Both sides want it. But in reality, it doesn't take us any nearer to a ceasefire. In fact, if we think about it logically, we are probably further away from a ceasefire now in Ukraine than we were about a month ago.
The government has delayed a plan to address child poverty until the autumn, saying they want to make sure that all policies are fully funded. The strategy, originally due to be published this spring, was expected to include a recommendation to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Our political correspondent Rob Powell has more.
Camden, Sir Keir Starmer's leafy North London constituency, plush townhouses and upmarket cafes. But cross the rail line and you find pockets of poverty here, as well as plenty of people who believe the Prime Minister should be doing more to support those in need.
Taking away support structures that are put in place to help people who are really struggling, and it's not good.
Does that surprise you, I guess, for a Labour government?
Yes, it does surprise me for a Labour government.
They seem to be worried about a small constituency of people who, or say a third of the country, who might vote for reform, rather than appealing to the people who would support them if they were seen to be doing something.
Only a couple of weeks ago, I just put a very small amount, just £5, that Keir Starmer will not be Prime Minister for the whole of 2027, because I think he will be under pressure to have something concrete, which I just think he's going to be able to give.
So Keir Starmer's MPs are concerned too, and since the election have been pushing for a cap that limits benefit payments to 2 children to be scrapped, something the Prime Minister has said the government can't afford. Research suggests more than 100 children are pulled into poverty by the cap every day, according to the Child Poverty Action Group. Scrapping the cap would immediately lift 350,000 children out of poverty, but it would cost £2.5 billion a year to fund.
This is one measure where it is incredibly cost effective as a way of protecting children from hunger and hardship, because 3 million children are trapped in really severe hardship, and that is not good enough, and it is not what the public expected when they elected this government.
Publication of a government child poverty strategy looking at whether to lift the cap has now been pushed back to the autumn, amid speculation that the Prime Minister may be planning another policy change.
Sir Keir Starmer has in the past said he'd like to lift the benefit cap when the government can afford it. But having just signalled a change on winter fuel cuts explained by an improving economy, many are now asking, if there's money for pensioners, why isn't there money for poor children too?
This Labour MP says the government should get rid of the cap immediately.
So there are poor pensioners and there are poor children. We have to address poverty in this country. We have to address structural poverty and the causes of it, whether you're 6 or 60. That's what we need to be addressing. I think the government can do more to alleviate pensioner poverty, and I think they certainly can do more to alleviate child poverty.
Announcements around child poverty are now likely to come in the autumn budget, with ministers promising an ambitious and far-reaching strategy. That will be too late for a coming battle over other welfare changes, though, the strains of governing for the whole country. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Civil rights activist Al Sharpton has accused Donald Trump of trying to reverse the progress made in policing since the death of George Floyd. This weekend marks the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. Reverend Sharpton has been speaking to Sky's Shingi Mararike.
It made me feel a combination of humiliation and deep anger. And I'm thinking about Eric Garner, whose funeral I preached and marches I led, who was killed in New York, choked by police saying, "I can't breathe." And all I can think about is, here we go again. Now it's in Minneapolis. I can't breathe. And what kind of person would hear somebody begging for their life and ignore this for over 9 minutes? And the more I watched it, the more I had anger starting to displace my humiliation.
Did that feel different?
It felt different because it was so graphic and so unnecessary. And at one level, I'm thinking of the brutality of it, and another level is, what was different is Donald Trump was president. And who are we going to address this to?
You mentioned Donald Trump was president. Once again, Donald Trump is president. And this week of all weeks, in the lead up to the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death, he has begun repealing the legislation that would bring in greater oversight of police departments, including Minneapolis. How do you feel about the timing of that, and what's your reaction to it?
It is deliberate. There's no way the people in the White House didn't know the 5th anniversary was coming up. They waited until the week before the anniversary of George Floyd to announce that they are stopping the police agreements with the federal government in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed. It's like pouring salt on the wound of those that were killed and those that fought.
Do you think Donald Trump and this White House are actively trying to reverse the change made off the back of George Floyd's death?
I think that Donald Trump and his administration is actively trying to reverse and revoke the changes and progress made with policing based on the movement that we all created after George Floyd's death worldwide. And I think that people need to remember Donald Trump was president when George Floyd happened, and he didn't do anything. We had to force it. And I think that his reaction and lack of reaction was part of why he was defeated by Joe Biden in 2020.
As you spend time with his family this weekend, what do you think George Floyd's legacy is and will be?
I think George Floyd's legacy will be what we're determined to make it. At this point, it is a time in history that people across racial lines, across age or generations, stood up. And the challenge is that we must turn those moments into a permanent movement, which is going to make law. It took 9 years, from 1955 to 1964, for Dr. King and that movement to get a Civil Rights Act after Rosa Parks sat in front of the bus in Montgomery in '55. We're 5 years out of George Floyd. We've got to change the laws. We can do it under 9 years, but we can't do it if we take our eye off the prize and not be determined to be satisfied when we had a moment. No, we need a movement that literally changes the laws.
Al Sharpton speaking to Shingi Mararike there, and Shingi joins us now live from Minneapolis, where commemorations are beginning. Shingi, how are people there planning to mark this anniversary?
Well, Barbara, we're just meters from the spot where George Floyd was killed here in Minneapolis, in the square now renamed in his honor. And that moment represented a racial reckoning, not just in America, but across the world, with a wave of protests and in some cases, including here in America, unrest and anger as well. But the events over the course of this weekend are meant to evoke very different emotions. It's a festival and it's meant to be a celebration as well as a chance to reflect on that. And we can show you a bit of what's going on here. So at the minute, there's a speaker on stage reflecting on what happened and talking about other social issues and other black men who have died at the hands of the police in America. But earlier over the course of the day, we also had marches and we also had people who were singing and chanting, and it was a kind of overly positive atmosphere. And there you can see the makeshift mural that has been in place over the last 5 years, not just commemorating George Floyd's life, but also the lives and the names of other people who have died after coming into contact with the police. And I think that reminds you there is such a distinctly political element to all of this, which I reflected on in that interview of Al Sharpton, because of the things that are happening in government with this administration, the rollback of diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, as well as the rollback of policing policy that would have brought in greater oversight over police departments, including here in Minneapolis. You get the sense when you talk to people here that they feel out of step with the administration, that they are angry and that they are feeling let down by those in government and those in power. But the overall mood as the events take place over this weekend is one in which they want to continue what Al Sharpton described there as a legacy of change. In fact, one speaker summed it up earlier today when they said they wanted George Floyd's case to be not just a cause, but a catalyst.
Shingi Marike live there for us in Minneapolis. Shingi, thank you. A police officer is said to be fighting for his life after being struck by a car in Buckinghamshire. He was on duty when the incident occurred on Thursday night in Stoke Poges. 2 men aged 28 and 38, both from Slough, have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. A third man has been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender and perverting the course of justice. A rally co-driver has died in a crash near Duns in the Scottish borders. Di Roberts, who was 39, was taking part in the Jim Clark rally. The driver in the incident, James Williams, was taken to hospital in Edinburgh with serious injuries. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie have welcomed the birth of their 4th child. Carrie Johnson shared a photo on social media announcing Poppy Eliza Josephine Johnson was born on the 21st of May. Poppy is Mr. Johnson's 9th child. The 60-year-old also has 4 children with his ex-wife, Marina Wheeler, and another child born in 2009. Zoos will be required to give animals bigger enclosures as part of welfare reforms announced today. The government says the new standards will modernize zoo practices and are long overdue. Among the measures, an end to the long-term tethering of birds of prey and letting visitors touch marine life. Sky correspondent Charlotte Leeming has more details now from Chester Zoo.
The majestic Asian elephants at Chester Zoo attract around 10,000 visitors a day. Under new government reforms, they'll soon have much more room to roam, with the enclosure here set to become 3 times bigger.
We're gold-plated here at Chester Zoo. You know, we're one of the top zoos in the UK, but we'll continue to evolve and continue to change. You know, we welcome the standards being launched today. You know, it's been a few years in the making, and we've been working really hard with DEFRA and other agencies to be able to get them launched.
The new standards of zoo practice is the biggest overhaul the sector's seen for over a decade. As well as larger enclosures, the tethering of birds of prey will be phased out, and there'll be a strict no-touching policy in aquariums, rules already in place here.
Zoos and aquariums now have 2 years to put their plans in place for this major reform, with the government telling them this is about conservation and compassion for animals in captivity.
But some animal welfare groups say the reforms don't go far enough.
It is really challenging to keep elephants in captivity with high welfare, and this is something that the RSPCA raised more than 20 years ago, and we're still seeing really serious welfare problems with high death rates, low birth rates, a lot of health and welfare problems. And so the RSPCA really challenges whether that's actually even feasible in the zoo environment.
Even these measures only go part way. Birds of prey, for example, can still be tethered for 4 hours a day. And the ban on touch pools only applies to some species. So these changes that we're seeing as a result of these standards don't go nearly far enough, and they don't solve the fundamental problem that wild animals simply do not belong in captivity.
Zoos will also need to place a greater focus on educating the public so visitors know how to treat animals with respect.
I think it's nice for the children to be able to interact with the animals, but I think, so long as the animals are happy and they're in the most comfortable environment for them, then that's what's most important, really.
If it can be perhaps controlled or something like that, I think that would potentially work. But I think to lose it as well wouldn't be great either. It's finding the right balance.
Yeah, I think they should, and morally, yeah.
This historic family day out is being modernised to put an end to outdated practices and provide animals with the highest levels of care. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Chester Zoo.
OK, let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Dave.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Patrick, let's go back to the start of your time here at Genoa. You took over in mid-season. It's the first time you've done that as a coach. Talk to us about the journey that you've had and the pride at the achievement of securing safety this season in Serie A.
It was a big challenge. It was a big task. And of course, I take time to make a decision because knowing the difficulties to go to a club in a mid-season with a huge challenges on the field because the result wasn't the best. Challenges with injuries because the group of players had a couple of injuries and important players, and of course huge challenges because of the stability of the club outside of the field. So when you put all together, it was a big one. But I strongly believed that I had the capacity and the quality to make this football club remaining in Serie A. There is a strength around this football club. And of course, what as well was a massive part of the decision was the fan base, the atmosphere in the stadium. So when I analyzed the situation and looking at the potential of the club, I think everything's there for me to do a good job.
How much have you drawn on the experiences from the clubs you've already managed?
I think in every club that I've been, I had a huge reflection on myself as a coach, as a manager, and today I'm a different coach, different manager, because those experiences make me reflecting on myself about what to do to improve myself, to challenge myself, and to be better. And I'm a different manager today than I was when I started with City under 21, when I started with l'OGC Nice, because those experiences make me more stronger and a better coach.
You mentioned Manchester City right at the very start there. How important was it for you to put the building blocks in place to learn your trade as a coach and as a manager so that you had longevity?
When I decided to go into coaching, I was clear in my mind that I wanted to do it for a long time of period. But to do that, you need to build credibility, you need to build experience. And at City, I was at the right place at the right time, and they gave me the opportunity to grow, to understand the job, and to start with the under 21, the development group, and then to have this kind of professional experiences in New York. So that really helped me to build myself.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, James Heal, and journalist and author Rachel Shabi. Welcome both. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Telegraph, and their headline is Farage to outflank Starmer on benefits. We'll be right back.